one of the first pillar of Mars is movement, as in we need to move more. Why have we become so sedentary? Is it the telly? Is it lack of knowledge? Is it too many other things going on?
I think it's a combination of all of those. I think and I say this now as we're all sat in chairs. I don't think it's the chairs that's the problem. I think it's how long we spend in them. And I think we need to be spending a little bit more time on the floor, getting out of them, getting on the ground, stretching a little bit, moving more regularly. But yeah, I think it's a combination of all of those.
Yeah, the chair. I mean, I will, not showing off. I don't do this when I'm sitting watching a TV program, but every time I sit in the office now, I balance this, so at least I'm getting some exercise and, exercising the core because, you're moving a little bit. But James, you said something earlier about somebody doing training for a marathon, deliberately got a job as where he had to stand up. I can't remember exactly the story now.
Well, no, it was Zalapek, who is the Finnish amazing middle distance runner. He won the 5,000, 10,000 and the marathon, all at the same Olympics. And he was Czechoslovakian, when it was Czechoslovakia. And so he was in the military and he volunteered for sentry duty. So he could stand up and then do squats as he was standing rather than sitting down, just for the not extra training, just so that he actually was balanced and up on his feet rather than sat down at a desk. And I think that's, there's companies now that are in Scandinavia that at 4 o'clock they have the rising desks, so they all stand up for the last couple of hours of work. Companies have tried it, the lifts, they make them stop at every floor so that people just get so annoyed that they'll walk up the first 3 floors because it takes us quicker to go on the lift. America have got a massive footprint in terms of how big the country is, but firms are making the car park 500 metres from the office. So they have to walk a kilometre, they're 500 metres, they're back to their car. So you're almost taking out an element of choice. And I think that's part of behavioural change is, yes, motivation, but also take away people's choice from it.
Yeah, I've always said I was in Kenya and I was watching just how people will walk 10 miles just to go to school, and at the sticks, a place called Samburu where we built some libraries and some schools, and it's just part of what they do every day. Kids walk miles and miles to go to school, and we stopped and we helped to Masai. We gave them a lift, and they were going 15 miles to go to an appointment. And why were they going for the appointment? Because she was pregnant and they were going to get tested. She was walking 15 miles to go to an appointment because she was pregnant.
I think it's amazing.
And my point was, I went in my brain, I went, God, do you know what I do? I drive around Sainsbury's looking for a car park spot closest to the door. I'll drive around 3 times looking for a car park spot as close to the door so I haven't got to walk 20 metres more. Well, it's pathetic.
Well, look at the school example, that, and this is, we should all be appalled by, and it will break our hearts, is that over 50% of kids living within 400 metres of school get driven. Not partly because obviously parents are going to work, but it's just you can see the school and you're still being driven there. And you think how someone from Kenya would go, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. You think of what you're describing there, and James, spot on. You think about what you're describing. You're talking about this, I suppose, from a more performance-based or sciencey-based thing. It's like this volume intensity distribution again.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about those young Kenyan, they're walking 10 miles, but they're walking. So it's at an intensity they can actually do it.
Yeah.
So they'll do that. So they'll just get in the move and they'll be in the sunlight for that amount of time,
yeah.
getting vitamin D and nitric oxide production, whatever it is from there, which is amazing. But then, like we've already discussed, or like we talk about all the time, is so where's this high intensity come in then? You see, so if you're high intensity, you're doing it for that amount of time.
Yeah.
And then you sit down all the time to rest after that. So you don't actually move then. So high intensity becomes intense and then rest.
Yeah.
Whereas if you moderate that intensity, you can basically keep it going all the time. So it's about distributing your energy over the course of the day. If you think about this from an ancestral perspective, you'd be thinking, okay, you wake up in the morning, we're outside, there's things to be done, it's hunting, gathering, whatever it was. But it would be distributed over the course of the day for everyone. So it'd be constant movement outside, that type of thing. And the intensity would regulate itself based on that. And the reason why those young Kenyans are able to do that is because they can't, because it's a totally doable thing at a given intensity. If they were asked to race at that every day, that distance every day, they wouldn't be able to do it. So this is what happens. It's about movement. So it's about movement, and movement being medicine. The classic was one of the first ever studies that was done on the old bus conductor studies, compared to bus drivers back in the 60s, when they realised that bus drivers were, bus conductors were living about 10 years longer than bus drivers. It was something amazing. Or having so many less heart conditions because they just moved. They were in the same job, they thought.
Yeah,
but
both
one
on the
sat
bus,
down, both on the bus. One sat down, one's going up and down the steps.
Yeah.
And taking tickets, etc. And the level of heart disease and longevity was completely different to the ones who sat down all the time. This is about this movement as medicine, distributing it throughout the course of the day. It's volume intensity dependent, and if you get it right, there's also frequency involved in there. Make sure you can do it enough and stuff. It's an absolute game changer.
It's a profession as well, what Christian's saying, in terms of the profession, over, not just regular jobs, but also including sportsmen. The profession that moves the most steps per day is a chef.
Well,
because they never sit down.
Yeah.
They're always just one step here, one step there, one step here. And I don't know if it was the same when you were playing football professionally, but the car park spaces that go at the training centre, are always nearest the gym door. You think you're going there to train for 5 hours a day, but I'm not walking. No, and so it's almost like a pecking order. Okay, that's a captain's spot. He's right next to the door. Yeah. And you think actually, even when people go to their local gym, health club, that they'll still look for the car park space that's nearest the door. You think, well, you've gone there to train. It doesn't really matter where you park.
It's really interesting that, because there's something in the intensity at which you exercise or move, but still allows you to function all day, every day, and the following day, and the following day. Yeah. So there's something and that's the kind of thing that I'm working on all the time. Is so where is that? Where's that point? Whereby you can actually continue to move each day. It's a really interesting place to be, because you can still drive adaptations and keep yourself young. And so we obviously know that we lose muscle potentially at 3% per year over the age of 40, something like that. Or you certainly lose strength even quicker than that. You lose strength quicker. We see that all the time when people come in to me. They'll see that they've got weak legs, for example, at age 50, and it's but they don't necessarily look like that, but they actually have. So it's about finding where is that movement, where is that intensity that allows you to still adapt over longer time spans, but not be too tired in which to function every day anyway, not have to sit down all the time. One of the reasons why the footballers will park like this, because they're thinking, I've got a tough day ahead of me today, and they'll get back in the car and then they'll go home and just sit down for the rest of the day, and everybody else is all doing stuff for them because they're just tired all the time. But there's probably a way of regulating that better.
So you're saying that too much intensity at the top end means you end up sitting down more. Yeah. And we know from a longevity point of view, you look at all the meta-analysis around longevity, there's a massive link, just undeniable now, from the people that sit the longest have the shortest lifespan. So you could end up sitting more, being a super athlete, but sitting more to recover from overdoing the training, not standing up enough, not moving enough, and therefore impact your longevity.
Incredible, isn't it? Yeah. Incredible. So I've got direct evidence of that, just clinically, from the coaching of. This is from about 15 years ago, something, from when we started to use heart rate monitors every single training session with the young athletes between the ages of 12 and 18. So we'd have them. I started to strap them all up with heart rate monitors, and we started to look at what was going on with their heart rates between training sessions and at training sessions and things like that. It was absolutely incredible. We could watch an athlete do a training session on a Tuesday, and they were deconditioning by the Thursday. So they trained, but they done nothing but sit down for the entire time until then and study. Wow. Because what's interesting, some of the best athletes are also the most studious. So they'll work really hard. So they'll just sit down inside for 2 days. Did you find that? See that? He found that. So he just trained all day.
Well, he did go back to university in his 40s. So
instead, just put the books down. But it was really interesting. You start to see direct evidence of that. Yeah. But what we found was that if you regulated their intensity of their training sessions, and started to add in other training. So let's say a zone 1 run, let's say it's 75% of your max heart rate, and just get out in the morning for that, and then do one another time, and just keep them drip feeding in.
Yep.
What would happen is it would completely offset it. So it was almost like even better than just moving every day. You could actually improve your physiology. So suddenly you've got this athletic system that was doing one thing, and the almost complete opposite to the athletic system, which was meaning everybody was moving on and racing PBs and stuff from not doing the system, the traditional system, because that was a no pain, no gain, high intensity, then sit down. Yep. This was a constant movement at a given intensity, moving every day. Yep. And that wins all day long.
Yeah.
It's interesting how you also how athletes become too specific, and football again, they'll do it and then they won't. They'll train hard. They'll rest up, and it's also actually then, I've done it at elite level as well, that you kind of lose the all-round nature of being a human, rather than you so focus on one thing that you kind of become deconditioned at life. So going to say the Olympics, so the opening ceremony is a real hassle in that it's so much time to effectively you go in there to walk around the track once. But if you got to go for hours and hours and hours. We didn't go because we raced the next day. But the swimmers, a lot of swimmers aren't allowed to go by their coaches, because when you swim, you weigh 1/7 of your body weight. So for them, being on feet for 4 hours is just don't do it. And you look at them going, you're at the Olympic Games, you should be able to stand up. But yet they're like fish, they can't stand up. So it's like you become so specialised in like a different species almost that they've come out of the water and they can't do it.
Yeah. It's really interesting because we've actually looked after a few swimmers, and one particular family actually would swim at quite high level, and they were in exactly that situation, whereas they had low bone density, which we saw, which is again evidence of not spending enough time against gravity or actually moving. But what was also fascinating is that if they went on their own machine, for example, their heart rates would
That's
go
tough
up.
though, Rose.
Tough. they would actually, their heart rates would go up and stuff, and it would be fine, like a normal sort of what you see like a normal thing. If they jogged, literally it was through the roof.
Really?
You could barely even have to move, and it was almost like they'd spent no time ever doing that. See, so it was an amazing thing to watch. We've got all this kind of data, so everything that James said, it totally resonates, because that's spot on. Just never do it. You're never moving against gravity. Yeah, you see
so
properly.
I think we've gone left field a bit, but I think the lesson from that. No, it's great. These are all lessons in life, aren't they? Which is, you need to be rounded for longevity. Yeah. You need to do a bit of everything. That's why Mars is important, movement, a bit of aerobics, a bit of resistance, a bit of looking at stance. Because if you just do one thing too much, then you'll be very healthy at that, but not necessarily healthy for life. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I think, and I can vouch for this quite a lot, because obviously I've come from quite a lot of gym experience of seeing, you sort of typically have people that fall into different pigeonholes. So you might have your weightlifters, and then you have your sort of people who love the cardio, and then your people who love the yoga. And so what we're about is blending all of those three modalities together. So be strong, work on your aerobic fitness, and be mobile and work on your flexibility to create the perfect, most adaptable, optimized human being that we possibly can, Yeah. I think it's all about training those three modalities and not just focusing on one, and not just kind of pigeonholing yourself into one of those categories.
I think that's interesting, because sometimes the way that I'll think about it is that you tend to look at, say, like fitness as being slightly different to health, So fitness is like being good at a given activity, so rowing or football or weightlifting or whatever it is. Like, it's a given fitness for that, and then you've got obviously health, which is more like the physiology that underpins all these metabolic processes and working harmoniously together instead of time. But maybe what we're discussing here is coming to the conclusion that there maybe is such a thing as a kind of general human fitness. Mm-hmm. Whereas if we look at certain parameters within that and make sure they're okay, make sure they're in order, We can regulate those. It allows us to go off in the world and do these other things and maybe work on a given specific fitness, you see. So maybe that's what we're saying here. It's like it's a marrying of those healthy principles and this kind of, you know, more specific traditional fitness things you would actually see, but would actually find in a human fitness there. That's a general thing, like good muscles, and you're talking about your movement, able to move well, so good muscles aerobic, you know, being good stance, and you've done your resistance exercise, and it's all based around those general principles of Mars. And then so what you have is a general human fitness, whereas you'd normally say it was specific, but maybe it's specific to health.
Yes.
Your metabolic health, you see, so maybe it's that.
Or you just say it's specific to longevity. So,
longevity, yeah.
Absolutely, overdoing any one sport. I mean, I played probably too much tennis. Hips are always aching from doing too much tennis. And James has always said that his posture is not as good as he would want it to be.
I feel terrible here.
These two.
But what you're saying, Steve, is there is if you only, you could say, right, if you only did those, you're going to enhance your longevity potentially almost to about as well as you could do.
Yeah.
But the other hand of that, you could actually go off and do something on top of that to take yourself to performance. That sometimes keeps people involved in it as well. So they'll develop those initial healthy principles first. They'll develop those, and then sometimes it's nice for them to have that little carrot at the end of it where they go, right, do you know what, I think I might do my first park run or something like that. You know? And everybody's got a different goal there, but there's a little journey for them towards that, and it keeps them in it. But if you're like me, I just actually quite like the idea of not necessarily hurting. I'm not like James. He loves to take himself to the edge, and I'm like, I'm quite happy to keep really healthy, and you know, just look at it like that. Look at it more like with those basic principles. Not push myself to it, but every now and again have a little look at where I am without, you know, and that's quite a nice place to be in as well. You know, if you're happy with that, which I'm quite comfortable with. You know,
now I'm going to ask you all three of some specific questions. Same questions, just like. 21 units of alcohol a week is what you're supposed to have, or 5 fruit and veg a day, all seems to be plucked out of thin air. 10,000 steps, is that something we all should be doing? Is it different for people of different ages, different weights, different fitness levels? Should people be setting themselves a step count? And of course, if you're not doing any at the moment, start with maybe 1,000, 2,000 or whatever. Where are we at on steps and just walking more? You know, there's a World Health Organization said you can live up to 7 years longer if you do 25 minutes walking a day. I haven't quite worked out how many steps that is, but you know, all these stats flying around. What start with James. What's your view on steps? Is it something that people should be counting, or?
I guess the way I view it is that there's no harm in it. So I think that's I think if you have it as it's interesting to know, and obviously 10,000 is better than 0, but it's not going to solve all your problems. I think that's I think in the same way that people have heard of calories, they don't really know what a calorie is. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like 10,000 steps is a number, but they don't really know what that means. And I think, so I would sort of ally it to, I reckon 10,000 steps is about 40 minutes of walking at 3 miles an hour, and a can of Coke is half an hour of walking at 3 miles an hour.
The energy burn.
The calories, to burn off that is half. So I think actually you're equating that rather than the calories in a can of Coke. You think if I had that, I've got to walk for half an hour. Yeah. And I think people may go, I don't really fancy that after all. So it's allying steps to something that you can get your head around, I think is the important part.
So something is better than nothing. If you're starting from 0, even 1,000 is good, and then moving it up to a point, and then beyond a certain amount, I guess you'd be doing it such a long time that you probably wouldn't then be doing any zone 1. You probably then wouldn't have time for your stretching. So some's better than none.
Yeah, absolutely. Is 10,000 for me like better than for James doing 10,000 steps? You know, he might 20,000 might be more suited for him. You know, I think you have to remember that a lot of people are really sedentary, and so 10,000 steps for someone who's like a couch potato and hasn't moved much is probably too much. You know, 3,000, 4,000. A walk around the block is enough. I think that number is there to obviously give people a target. Again, it's like the 5 pieces of fruit and veg a day. It's to have a focus and a target to aim for, because without that, people will probably do nothing.
Yeah.
I
mean, back to the stat, James, you said in the other film, was it 80% of adults living in Britain today haven't walked 1 mile constantly once in a year.
Yeah, 20 minutes once in a year. And to be honest, I don't think I regularly used to hit 10,000 steps. Once I got a dog, that I did, because I'm quite good at running. I'd run 10,000 steps, but walking seems quite a pointless way of getting anywhere. Whereas certainly if you've got a dog, then actually it means you do stuff. And if you do a big weekly shop, you drive. So you realise actually, initially you started, how do we, is it society's changing, why we're more lazy? But actually, if you think, things that we used to do, that, housework was all much more manual. Then everything that we found, humans have found a way to do it easier. Watch my parents, they used to do it one way, then they did it easy with technology, and now they have a cleaner. So suddenly all that extra movement you would have done is now defunct. And I think we're changing.
That's right. I think it's an interesting thing. So you've got, like, with any sort of, let's say, World Health Organization data that comes out, you've always got epidemiological studies that are more correlation than causation, for example, right? So when you're looking at, say, like the number of steps, I actually quite like, the fact that people move. But I think what this is also about is understanding what that means out with that. So what's interesting for, like, from my perspective is when I look at my day and I look at this number of steps I've had in the day, I actually am something like that, 10,000 steps. And that's potentially without walking. It's just my day. So this is about potential movement of people, and then what that means for you in terms of when you look back at it, you are at 10,000 steps. So if not necessarily target 10,000 steps, you just end up living the type of lifestyle where it is actually about 8, 9, 10,000 steps. But I also think within those steps, there's other things going on as well. Like, James got a dog, you're going outside. I mean, my goodness, that's amazing. So that you've got your own natural vitamins straight there, the sunlight hits the skin, UVA hits the skin, and you've got nitric oxide production straight away for endothelial function, and blood dilation, blood cell, or you've got vitamin D production from that. I mean, so suddenly the act of potentially steps, there's other things going on as well with it. You've got to, and I think it's so you find you can correlate with the health, but it's maybe what that also means, that you're actually doing other things, or other things are ending up that. So there's loads of movements can take you to that, and also that that leads to doing other things that provide the longevity. So it's a few things at play, which is really cool.
And getting outside is so.
Getting outside is amazing. Yeah, it's so important. I've actually started to prescribe myself sunlight because I know the benefits of it, and it is like taking some kind of magic pill in some sense. But it's only when you don't do it for long spells. You do definitely start to suffer. Your health starts to suffer. You don't feel right, and you start to you see your heart rates are changing, and it's like and you don't feel good. And humans definitely need to be outside, and that's part of sedentary behaviour tends to be outside. Inside.
And of course, you mentioned nitric oxide, which we get from sunlight. We get it from walking. We get it from most exercise. And nitric oxide, relaxes the endothelium. Less likely to have heart disease. Less likely to have a stroke.
One of the most important molecules in the body. I mean, it's unbelievable. In fact, if everything you did ultimately, from a health perspective, manifests itself in an optimal production of nitric oxide that allows that blood vessel dilation, that's really what you're aiming for, really. Probably the damage that we cause ourselves in general is a degrading of the endothelial layer and all the inflammation that would cause. That means that's at the root cause of probably things like heart disease and all types of different things. So so that's just, if it manifests itself in that, then there's something right. So to have a ready-made source of that potentially hitting your skin and producing that,
But of course, most people have been told to cover up and slap on sunscreen as soon as the sun comes out, and therefore they don't get the benefit from it.
And so going back to what Christian and James just touched on, what they're referring to is something called NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, and that's all of the sort of calories that you would burn or energy you would consume outside of those like normal daily steps. And I think as a coach, that's something we're always trying to get up, for especially people that have those really sedentary jobs. Is just for every hour they're sat down, you know, if you can just spend 5 minutes getting up and out of the chair and going up to the top floor and using the bathroom upstairs rather than downstairs, just to get those extra, and before you know it, those steps are, you know, up to that 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 anyway.
Yeah,
and then you might
that's
go
what
up.
I've found.
Yeah.
It's I mean, just by moving during the day, you end up something like that. You know, just by helping people and picking things up, and you know, you just move.
But the biggest lesson I think is applicable to life comes from owning a dog. In that I had his injections, you know, when he was young. I was talking to the vet about pet insurance, and with work, he goes, as a vet, he goes, don't do it. He goes, the reason I see most domestic animals is they're overweight. He said that if 2/3 of our pets are overweight because we feed them, like we feed our kids, we feed them too much. And so you want to look at, he said, he's got a dog and he goes, got to stand above it, and he says, that's your dog shape. That should not change from now until he's no longer with us. So don't overfeed him, walk him, and everything else, you know, if he has an injury, it'll be, you know, you'll have to suck it up. But in terms of paying for it, don't overfeed him. There's so many of the other things that people come in for are non-existent because he's a healthy dog. Yeah. Yes, if he falls over or gets hit by something, that's different. Yeah. But don't overfeed the bugger.
Yeah, I was talking to a doctor, Joe McCormack, recently, and I went, humans are the only species that aren't the weight they're designed to be. I mean, you know, I said, like, you know, gorillas, you know, they're supposed to be big because of, you know, where they are. The polar bear has to be big to carry fat to get through the winter, and we're the only other species. She said, and I said, we're the only species that isn't the shape it's designed to be. And she turned around and she said, you're wrong. I went, no, I've done all my research. We're the only species on the planet that isn't the shape they're designed to be. She said, you're wrong. I went, what else? She said, our domesticated animals. She's absolutely right, because
Dogs,
we feed them the same crap that we eat.
It's amazing. I mean, it's like in the zoo. I mean, if you go and see, people can have their opinions on zoos, but if you go to a zoo to see a lion, because they have to feed it a species-appropriate diet or it will die in that captivity, it looks like a lion, you know? Imagine that was humans in there, in that cage, they would look... Yeah. You wouldn't know what a human was. There'd be so many different shapes.
Yeah, I've watched Big Brother.
Exactly. There's so many different shapes and sizes and that. You know, what would be the human shape? Yeah. Which one would it be? Would it be the one who's lean athletic? Would it be the one who's carrying lots of weight? And you know.
And when it comes back to the thing about exercise and shape and losing weight, last year when the Euros were on, they reran the beginning of the 1966 World Cup, and my wife and I was watching it, and the first 5 minutes was everybody walking into Wembley with the old towers, the whole stadium, and I said to my wife, what's different? She said, it's black and white. I went, no, come on, what's different now to then? Yeah. And I said, look, not a single overweight person, not a single overweight person. Straight afterwards was the riots in America, and it just like a different shape of human beings. So in 50 years, we've changed shape. Now, we're exercising more because there's more people jogging, there's 10 times more gyms than there's ever been, so we're exercising more. We're not moving as much and we're eating the wrong diet.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to the 10,000 steps you're mentioning, is if you treat it as part of normal life, or if you treat it as a finish line and go, you don't get a free pass to then eat what you want after that. That's true. It should be just part of life rather than, hey, here we go.
That's so true. I've worked with so many clients that have that mindset. It's that exercise and then reward scheme. It's like, oh, I've earned it, so I'm going to go to the pub tonight and have a few pints of beer with my pals. You know, it's breaking that mindset, isn't it?
It's liquid bread beer. That's the sad part. I mean, that's 10,000 steps gone in one.
Last marathon, James was the highest placed celebrity runner, sub 3 hours. He rings me up the next day. I'm really annoyed. I went, don't be annoyed, mate. It's brilliant. Watched you, brilliant, fantastic, fastest runner, celeb. He went, no, I'm really annoyed. What's that? He said, I only burnt 2,800 calories.
I couldn't believe it. It's just so unfair. That's a Big Mac meal.
That's it, and you're done. That's it.
You need to take longer and go slower. So movement means walking more. It means getting out of our chair. It might be like you were saying, James, other countries, just getting used to standing up when you're in the office. But movement also means stretching. I suppose that overlaps with stance and stability as well a little bit. But just moving. Yeah,
moving a lot more. You just touched on it, stretching. I think so many of us are tight, so many of us are stiff, and then when it comes to our exercise practice, we're going into it without doing the right sort of preparation before going into lifting weights. And everybody, we know the benefit of lifting weights. We know the benefit of strength training. So we're all told that we have to do it, but I think we just need to be a little bit smart on what we do before we go into that. Yeah. Lots of stretching, lots of mobility-based exercises just to...
And do we need to stretch a lot because we are sitting down a lot? I mean, isn't that part of the problem? I mean, I have to sit one of these so I don't slouch. And yet I look at my little 5-year-old, 6 now, and he sits upright, absolutely perfect.
Good squatters, kids, aren't they? The good squatters, they're good mobility. They get
you look at the way a toddler can stand up from bum on ankles straight up, and you think, I wish I could do that.
I've lost that somewhere along the line.
And it's the sedentary jobs, It's being sat down for too long a time. I've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and they both move fantastically, and you can learn a lot from how they move. But then they're always on the floor. Like they're rarely sat in chairs, and when they are, they're there for 2 minutes, and they're up and they're moving. Yeah. So if we get down more on the floor, even something as simple as just, I do this with my elderly clients, trying to
Twister.
Great game.
Twister,
is get them down on the floor and teach them how to get back up again. Yeah. Because and this goes back to our bed level where we sleep. Yeah. It's waist level, isn't it? Other countries, they sleep with their mattresses on the floor, so they get down further. Yeah. In other countries, they don't sit when they're waiting for the bus, they squat down because there are no seats at the bus stop, so they're forced to squat down, so they have better range of motion in their ankles and their knees and their hips. Yeah. So
you go to Asia.
It's interesting sitting down. I was doing some work out in South Korea, and the restaurants there are no tables and chairs. You're on the floor, and it was interesting how, firstly, uncomfortable it was, and also you ate less because it wasn't. It's your stomach full. It's like, how long can I tolerate sitting down? Yeah, and it's just, you go to a restaurant and go, that's got comfy chairs, and suddenly you're there for that much longer.
Yeah. Sitting on the floor is so important. I mean, if you've got to sit down, try and sit. Yeah, again, like everything, like exercise. Once the body gets used to something, things start going wrong and you get less benefits from it. So if you have got to sit down a lot, try and vary it. Try and sit on the floor. Try and sit straight leg, cross leg. Try and sit with your back against the wall. Yeah. Sit on a cushion.
Well, listen.
Vary it all.
When we sit in a chair, we get really comfortable. If we were to all go down on the floor now, it would be probably 3 minutes before we change position. So just the benefit of getting down there, you're changing position far more often because it's more uncomfortable for us to be down there than it is here. I could sit here for like another couple of hours. Yeah. If we get down there, a couple of minutes, and I want to move.
Well, it's interesting. I was doing something in the empty quarters, big desert, and do something with the Bedouin, and you sit down, and they got their dish dashing around their head, and they sit down for around a fire, and the first thing they do, they take it off, and they figure of 8 around their knees. Yeah. So which means they haven't got we're all there going like this. That's locked in place. So they make sitting down comfortable because they're used to it, and then also they make their own chair. Whereas we were totally lost that chair, and totally lost where you couldn't have your feet below your waist. So I had to dig a little sandpit to put my feet in.
Well, I'll tell you what's really interesting. It is interesting. This is one of the things that I wrestle with in my own studio, is whereas you've got this balance between having people picking things up off of the floor and also maybe raising the weight sometimes to make it easier for them to do it, because you've got this, because of the world we do live in now, it's if you make it too difficult for a human to do something, they might avoid it. So it's about getting them into positions and condition, whereas they realise that it's okay to maybe have to spend a bit of time preparing like a a bar of some kind for them to pick. So we've taken some of the bars off the floor, for example, and put them onto stands and stuff, and it does mean that people come in and use them, but the idea is that eventually they can not have to do that a lot of the time. There's also a little interesting experiment that we ran, whereas one day I put so the rowing machines are obviously quite low to the floor. So there was this interesting one where maybe people slightly avoid it because they're low, So what I did was one day I put all the rowing machines up high. So I put the weight plates down and just built them all up. And what you'd find is people walk past and sit on it. Because it was there. So they just put a leg over it and sit on it. I'll do that, that's great. I would sit on it like that. And then they would just get off. So it was actually the act of sitting down low that stopped them going on it.
Well, that's the funny thing. The manufacturer, the one that is in all the gyms, they've, over the last 5 years, since I stopped, they've built them higher because people would actually get on rather than can't get down
that's
there.
That's what I'm saying. It's mad, isn't it?
So yeah,
whereas really an ideal world to be low. You're getting people to squat, then they've got a natural squat to get back up again. But this, you're trying to trade off here between trying to get people on it and to make sure they do it.
I think we'll conclude this one then. So. One tip from everybody each. So movement, first bit of Mars, we're sedentary as a nation. Sedentary, we know something sitting too much shortens lifespan. One tip from each of you. In fact, start with you, Charlie, around movement.
I'm all about moving with intent.
Okay.
Because a lot of the people that I work with have come from a history of going in the gym, zoning out, using it as a way to de-stress, put the headphones in, listen to a podcast or listen to some music, and they're not. And you look at them, you can see they're doing it wrong. They might be rounded, or kinetically something might be off. So best bit of advice I can give is when you exercise, when you train, tune in, dial in, think about what you're doing. Not saying that you might not use exercise as a form of de-stressing, but just really dial in on your form and pay attention to how your body is moving, because you can learn so much and you can get so much more out of your session from actually moving with intent rather than just going through the motions.
Great advice.
So I would probably advise that with what I would do is get people to learn how to use the broomstick.
Yes.
And I would get people to learn exactly what those postural positions are when you use a broomstick, to work on your posture and how to contract your muscles within those postures. As soon as you start to learn how to do that, you can take yourself through a whole variety of ranges of motion, which means standing up, sitting down, etc. over time become much, much easier to do. Much easier. You can do it from a standing position initially and you don't have to move too far. But as soon as you learn how to contract your muscles eccentrically, isometrically and concentrically, which would be like almost lowering, holding, hovering and standing in those positions, and be able to spend a bit of time in those positions, it's amazing how the type of conditioning you get and control you get within the muscle. It's almost like a motor control you gain from that, which degrades over time. Mm-hmm. And if you can just learn to do these wee bits and make that a part of your day, or certainly a part of your week, then every other movement on top of that feels easier. And that's what we find just by practicing doing that.
Do you personally still do the broomsticks as well?
All the time.
Yeah,
do it all the time.
So it's not just a way of improving your posture, your stance, and your range of movement when you're either recovering from injury or you haven't been exercising for a while. It's still something that everybody should practice. Unbelievable warm-up tool, so first thing you do in the morning is do that. In fact, what I've actually started to do is before I go to work, I go outside every morning, try and get a bit of light in, onto the grass, and I just do a little bit outside myself, a little bit of posture work, 5 minutes, get myself going a little bit outside on the grass, just like taking a bit of, obviously I wouldn't do it if it's raining, but and just spend a bit of time doing that. And when you've finished even just spending just a few minutes doing that, the difference in you feel like you could sprint. And I think that's the biggest thing I think it gives you, because that type of control, the type of feeling you have in your muscles, you feel like you could almost go from a non-warmed up position to actually flat out sprinting straight away. So it's that type of feeling you get. It's like it helps you to coordinate all your muscle groups together. Yeah. See, and I think that's what I've found amazing for it. So everybody who comes in automatically, I've been fascinated, who comes into the studio will automatically pick up a broomstick now because they've worked out what it does. Yeah.
So
I'm glad you said that, because that's the right answer, because we've built it into every level of all our 12-week programs.
Yeah, it's absolutely
posture, as you keep saying, is important for movement.
Yeah.
It underpins your aerobics, it underpins your resistance training, and certainly when you get stance, it's so
amazing.
important.
But also what this, just in general, it enhances. You're obviously using your muscles, and as soon as you activate your muscles, all sorts of metabolic processes start to kick in. Your muscles' ability to metabolize energy, just in general. These things are just actually start to happen immediately when you start to work on them. So, it's a big thing. What you find is it's an anti-aging tool. People who are younger sometimes find it a bit more difficult because the controlling eccentrically and stuff when they're growing, so it can help offset growth spurts and things like that.
Really?
Brilliant down there. Oh, wow. Amazing for that. And on the other side, as people age, they find that more difficult to do as well, to start to control the muscles, or if they have any conditions such as type 2 diabetes, etc., because they've got such poor muscle function, which is one of the manifestations of poor metabolic health. Yeah. So from their perspective, it allows us to gauge what's happening with them as well. And you just see those exercises moving on, and you can work on the range all the time then, but they're not using any weight, but they're getting a huge adaptation from that. So across entire age ranges. Another interesting one is athletes. We had an Essex champion cross-country runner come into us and was unable to stand up off the chair without using her hands.
Wow.
But she came in knackered, overtrained, so she was unable to stand. And if you tried to get her to lower to a bench and sit down, she'd smack off, we couldn't control it. So of course, it's really good for monitoring this type of overtraining, things like that. You can see she's lost that ability to contract. So slow them down, teach them how to contract their muscles, build up a little bit more strength, keep them there, work their zone one. When you checked her zone one, it was miles off compared to her actual speed that she could race. So that difference had got too big, but it manifests itself in her inability to move and contract her muscles properly. Wow. See, so that's it. Right, let's change that now. Completely fine.
And again, that's an indication of wrong training, overtraining, and not coming back to the basics.
Exactly. Inappropriate stress without the foundation. Yeah. And so we just set that foundation again. But it's great for us all providing something for somewhere to go to actually know how to do that.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. And James, I know you've spent a lot of time trying to help the government of getting the country moving, and probably one of the biggest advocates in the UK for just move more. How would you summarise the best bit of advice we could give to people?
The best bit of advice I would give is never take a lift. In everyday life, don't always carry your bag in one hand. Just vary the bag so you're not suddenly starting to do that. And if you're out with your mates or out with friends, don't be the first one to suggest sitting down. Yeah. Just be the last. So actually, you're standing up more. Yeah. As I was saying, you're just building in exercise to part of your life. You don't need to take the lift to go a few flights of stairs. And then up and coming down, you realise that if you run a marathon or go really hard, coming down is worse than going up. Yeah. So actually, you need to eccentric. So up and down the stairs. Don't be the first one to suggest sitting down, and alternate which bag you carry hand in.
It's interesting that, James, because for one of the first things we get back when someone's improving their health is that they can walk down the stairs okay, but they actually hadn't realised they're walking down sideways and things like that up till then. Sometimes it actually takes them to, it's the same as everything, it's like brain fog and everything, you don't realise you've got it until you change it. So suddenly they realise that they're not going sideways down the stairs anymore, they're actually walking down the stairs. They can load eccentrically, see? So James is describing the same thing as the athlete there. After you've run a marathon, you go down, you've overdone it so much to the point where you can't walk down the stairs. You see that actually just, within general daily life with people who've got metabolic health conditions. So it's really interesting, same thing, isn't it?
It's amazing how you can measure improvements from things that are just so simple.
Yeah,
simple. Can you get out of the chair? Yeah. Can you stand on one leg?
Yeah.
Can you walk down the stairs one step at a time, not sideways?
Yeah.
Well, the biggest challenge with artificial lower limbs is walking down a hill. Yeah. Because uphill is they can do it, but downhill and downstairs on an artificial knee joint that's the biggest challenge to it. Not every other. So you realise that's.
And which marathon is it again? Where it's like the largest sort of height to depth distance, but it doesn't have the fastest time. It's like Boston or something.
Boston doesn't count because it's the start point is sort of something like 4% higher than
but it
the
doesn't.
finish
But it doesn't
point.
have the fastest time because you're eccentrically loading your muscles so much you trash them. You know, so you basically can't run as fast in the end because it's.
You can probably run a couple of 100 metres faster
that's
anymore.
it. But you're just loading the whole way.
I did a fell run, which is obviously through the hills. It was the hills in Yorkshire, and uphill I was fine. Downhill, you got people overtaking you with their feet were going past my ears, and I was like, ooh, I couldn't walk. Uphill was fine because that was hard enough. Downhill, I realised how I just avoid doing anything like that eccentrically loads. It's just, I've kind of evolved in a way that is not adapted for normal life. If people needed river taxis, I'd be absolutely killing it. But there's no market.
Brilliant. We'll end it on there.
Brilliant.
You're just going to say keep moving and move more.